non-plan table about the need for rules. So that I'd like to hear a bit more about whether we think we need a plan in the first place, rather than how we're experiencing how the plan is applied. Because I think there are problems with that, but that's maybe another debate.
Yeah. I'd like just to pick up a few of the points, if I may, especially from Alfred's opening. But I have to just slightly caveat what I say and say it's personal opinion, because I think I'm the first architect to be chairman of the National Planning Forum, and I would hate to get into trouble quite so quickly.
That's why you're sitting on it.
Just to go back to the issue of design, I think the problem is broadly in the process, much more than the rest of it. And in my career span, design has fallen out of planning. Now, I'm a chartered town planner as well as an architect, and I went through a 4-year day release course at Central Poly, and architecture was 8 lectures, which, as you can imagine, was more than enough. Trees only got 4. But there used to be a character in the borough called the borough architect, and I used to have schemes referred for their design merit or otherwise by the planning case office to the borough architect. But he would pen, usually freehand on one side, he would make his design opinion known. And in that simple pattern, you had embodied in the process of the authority a design skill which could easily be referred to by planning officers. And we've lost that, and I don't see it coming back. And this kind of hiring it out to designer review and other options, I think is second best. But it does attempt to meet the problem. Islington always has a non-voting member on the planning committee who is not a politician but is a local architect. And they usually have 2 or 3 who are rotated. They can't vote, but in the well of the council chamber, the discussion about design and his opinions about the design are treated seriously and given some value, which is a non-political input. And that's another way in which an authority can address the issue. But it is quite difficult. And I think that I would just pick up, if I may, a number of points of Alfred's. First of all, the 1947 Act was, the aim of it was to nationalise development land. But they had no money. They just fought a war, amongst other things. And so they very cleverly said, well, we've got no money, so we can't buy the land. But what we can do is nationalise the development rights over the land, which is what our system is about. It's thoroughly communist. And if you think about debates about the Metropolitan Green Belt, Abercrombie and Foreshaw's plan for London 1944, the idea of the Green Belt was to give public access for recreation, etc., around London. And the intention was to buy the land. Well, after about 2 acres, they kind of ran out of money. And so it's been ossified ever since, because it doesn't have automatic public access. It doesn't have those sorts of purposes imposed on it. It's just kind of a no man's land, where occasionally you're lucky and you can get public access, but much more often it's just kind of not one thing or the other and doesn't actually have much of a purpose, even though there are planning purposes which can be attributed to development in the Green Belt, which is a different thing. So I think that's a sort of bit of history. If we zoom back to where we are now, with a government that is saying things about planning which are being reacted to by its own best friends rather strongly. Having been on the Killian Pretty review, which some of you will remember, was when one APP came in, thanks to Arabs earning a couple of million quid to dream up a much more complicated form and list all those things we had to do. And Andy and I went to see the civil servant doing that and said, this will be a train crash. Within 2 years of introducing it, Killian and Pretty review came in. There were 3 of us on the steering group, 2 planning officers and me, and I described the exercise as counting the bodies. They did smooth some of the rougher edges, but we're now still stuck with this incredibly defensive system where the authorities, and the officers, quite understandably, do not want to be caught out by judicial review and other things, and therefore they say, look, if it's on the list, you better do it, just in case. Instead of having it the other way around, you don't need to do anything until we're absolutely sure we need to do it. And therefore you have a lorry load instead of a 4-page TP1 and a drawing, which used to be a planning application. And that's where we are now. And I think that the tiny little glimpse of hope is that under the emerging new planning regime, we have a hierarchy of plans where policies come tuttering down, and down to the neighbourhood level, the plan can be created with local support, provided it does work within the limits set by the plan above it, the local plan, of which it would become part. The local plan in London, the borough plan, will have to comply with the mayor's plan, and that, I think, will happen more when there are more mayors. And then there's the national policy context and a regime for major infrastructure. Now, given that context, and given the simplicity and clarity, which is what planners, reformers, always seek, but can never quite struggle their way towards, but the NPPF itself is an attempt at that. And I'm sure, by the way, that the PPG 24s and all that will still be available for reference, because it would be madness to do anything else. The technical stuff won't disappear, it will just have a status which is normal, and you simply accept all parties that it is to be referred to, unless there's a reason why not. I'm sure that's what will emerge. But if you have a simple set of policies and rules, then it follows, it seems to me, that any development proposal which falls within the rules merely has to be certified by the qualified person putting the proposal together, even architects, that it is compliant. And that's it. It doesn't need planning permission because it's compliant. It may be that they have to lodge it with the local planning authority if in any doubt to make sure that they agree that it's compliant. But compliance for over half of all planning applications is not difficult. 85% get planning permission in the end. Well, about 50% probably get planning permission pretty well as they were formulated. So the work of the planning department to bring up to speed and quality the difference should go on, so that where a proposal isn't compliant, then it has to go into the system and get processed and then signed off. And if you add to that Alfred's other valuable point, where there is duplication, where other law and regulation, environmental, energy, sustainability, and all that stuff, which is largely in building control, should never be duplicated. And I think the simple rule should be that if it's dealt with elsewhere, it isn't dealt with in planning. And then you suddenly find that you have got fewer rules, but clearer rules, and the opportunity for the skilled people who put them together. And by the way, the 80+% of applications where there isn't an architect would change, because they wouldn't be able to certify those, the people who are putting those things together wouldn't be recognised to sign them off as compliant. or they'd have to go to an agent, like as in building control.